My entire family knew my wife was cheating on me with my brother and helped her hide it. At my 35th birthday party, when I confronted them, they told me to be mature and just accept it, they're soulmates. My mother even said, "Don't be selfish. They're happy together." I just smiled and said, "You're right. I should be happy for them." I got up to leave and handed an envelope to my wife and my parents. Minutes later, she was screaming and begging me to come back as she stared at what was inside. I'm Daniel, 35, and until 6 months ago, I thought I had the perfect life. I work as a senior systems analyst at a mid-sized tech company, nothing glamorous, but I'm good at what I do and people respect me. I'm the guy everyone calls when their computer crashes or they need help setting up their smart TV. I've always been the reliable one, the one who shows up on time, keeps his word, and takes care of everyone around him. I've been married to Elise for 7 years. She's 32, works in marketing, and when we met, I thought she was way out of my league. Beautiful, outgoing, the kind of person who lights up a room. We weren't perfect, what couple is? But I loved her completely. I've been slowly saving every extra penny to build us our dream home, working overtime and side gigs to make it happen. Then there's my younger brother Lucas, 30. He's always been the family favorite, the charming one, the creative one, the one who just needs to find his path. While I was grinding through college and building my career, Lucas was bouncing between opportunities, wannabe musician, aspiring photographer, crypto investor, you name it. None of them ever stuck, but our parents always defended him. He's artistic, they'd say. Not everyone can be like Daniel. Despite everything, I loved my brother. When he needed help, I was there. I helped him get freelance web design gigs through my network. When he needed a car, I co-signed the loan because his credit was terrible. When he was short on rent, I'd slip him a few $100s. That's what family does, right? My parents, Annalise and Gerald, are good people, or so I thought. Dad's a retired electrician, Mom worked at the local library until she retired last year. They raised us to value family above everything else. Family first, Dad always said. Blood is thicker than water. The irony isn't lost on me now. Looking back, there were always subtle signs that I was the odd one out. When we'd have family dinners, Lucas would regale everyone with stories of his latest adventure while I'd quietly eat and listen. When I'd share news about a promotion or a big project at work, they'd nod politely and then immediately turn the conversation back to Lucas. "You don't need as much attention," Mom would say when I pointed it out. "You're successful already." Elise and Lucas had always been close. Too close, if I'm being honest, but I trusted them both completely. They'd text each other constantly, she'd laugh at all his jokes, and he'd always find excuses to come over when I was at work. But I never suspected anything. Why would I? She was my wife, and he was my brother. The first real crack in my perfect world came about 8 months ago. Elise started getting distant, not dramatically, just different. She'd put her phone face down when I walked into the room. She'd get dressed up for girls' nights that seemed to happen with increasing frequency. When I'd ask about her day, her responses became shorter, vaguer. The suspicions started small, the kind of things you tell yourself you're imagining because the alternative is too horrible to consider. Elise would be oddly cold some days, treating me like a roommate rather than a husband. Lucas started showing up at our house more often, always with some excuse. He needed to borrow tools, wanted to use our printer, had to drop something off. The timing was suspicious too, he'd arrive within an hour of me leaving for work trips. The phone calls were the worst part. I'd walk into a room and hear Elise talking in hushed, intimate tones, only for her to quickly say I have to go when she saw me. When I'd ask who it was, she'd give me vague answers, just Nina from work or my mom. But when I'd call her mom later, she'd mention they hadn't spoken in weeks. Then there were the little things that made my skin crawl. Coming home from a weekend work conference to find my toothbrush in a different position in the holder. The guest bedroom looking like someone had slept in it. A coffee mug in the sink that I didn't recognize, Lucas's favorite brand that I never bought. The breaking point came during a 3-day business trip to Chicago. Something felt off when I left. Elise seemed almost eager for me to go, kissing me goodbye with what felt like relief rather than affection. On impulse, I stopped at an electronics store and bought a small security camera. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I just needed peace of mind about our home security. I set it up in the living room, hidden behind some books on the shelf, with a view of the kitchen and front door. It was connected to an app on my phone, and I told myself I'd probably never even check it. I was wrong. On the second day of my trip, during a lunch break between meetings, I opened the app. What I saw destroyed me. There was Elise, in our kitchen, wrapped in Lucas's arms. They were kissing, not a friendly peck, but the kind of passionate kiss that left no doubt about their relationship. The timestamp showed it was just 2 hours after she'd texted me missing you so much. Can't wait for you to come home. But the worst part? The ease of it all. Lucas had a key. When had she given him a key? He moved around our house like he lived there, opening our refrigerator, sitting on our couch, acting like the man of the house while I was away working to support the life we'd built together. I sat in that conference room, surrounded by colleagues discussing quarterly projections, and felt my world crumble. 7 years of marriage, a lifetime of brotherhood, and it was all a lie. I didn't confront them immediately. I spent the rest of that business trip in a haze, mechanically going through the motions while my mind raced. Part of me hoped I'd misunderstood what I'd seen, that there was some innocent explanation. But deep down, I knew better. When I got home, I tried to act normal while I figured out what to do. I made copies of the footage, screenshot the timestamps, and started paying closer attention to their behavior. The signs were everywhere once I knew what to look for: the way they'd avoid eye contact with me when they were in the same room, how Elise would suddenly become affectionate with me whenever Lucas was around, as if overcompensating. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I confronted Elise privately, in our bedroom, with the footage queued up on my phone. "I know," I said simply, showing her the screen. She stared at it for a long moment, her face cycling through shock, panic, and then something that surprised me: anger. "You were spying on me?" she snapped. "I was protecting my home," I replied. "How long?" She broke down then, crying and begging forgiveness. "It just happened, Daniel. We never meant for it to happen. It was just. We connected, you know? You're always so busy with work, and Lucas was there for me." But then, as quickly as the tears started, they stopped. Her face hardened, and she looked at me with something close to contempt. "You're overreacting," she said. "It's not like we planned this. Sometimes things just happen between people. You wouldn't understand." I felt like I'd been slapped. Here was my wife of 7 years, caught cheating with my brother, and she was acting like I was the problem for being upset about it. "We need to tell your family," I said. "This affects everyone." She nodded, but something in her expression made me uneasy. "You're right. We should tell them together." That should have been my first warning. I called my parents and asked them to come over, said we needed to have a family discussion. When they arrived with Lucas in tow, I knew something was wrong. They all looked prepared. Like they were bracing for something they'd already discussed. "Mom, Dad," I started, my voice shaking despite my efforts to stay calm. "I need to tell you something about Elise and Lucas." My mother held up her hand. "Daniel, honey, we know." The words hit me like a physical blow. "You know?" "We've known for months," Dad said, not meeting my eyes. "We were hoping you'd figure it out on your own." I looked around the room, at my parents, at my wife, at my brother. They were all watching me with expressions that ranged from pity to impatience. No one looked ashamed. No one looked sorry. "How long have you all known?" I asked. "Since it started," Lucas said, speaking for the first time. He had his arm around Elise's waist, right there in my living room. "We tried to fight it, Daniel, but you can't fight true love." "True love?" I repeated, the words feeling foreign in my mouth. "They're soulmates, Daniel," my mother said gently, like she was explaining something to a child. "You've always had trouble holding on to things. Maybe it's time to let this go." My father nodded gravely. "Son, you need to be mature about this. They're happy together. Don't you want them to be happy?" I looked at Elise, who was now openly holding Lucas's hand. "So this whole evening, this was supposed to be some kind of announcement?" "We thought it would be easier to tell you together," she said. "As a family." "Your birthday seemed like perfect timing," Lucas added. "New year, new beginning, you know?" My younger sister Sophie, who had been quiet until now, finally spoke up. "Maybe you two just weren't meant to be, Daniel. Things happen for a reason." I stood there, surrounded by my entire family, being told that I should be happy about my wife's affair with my brother. That I was being immature for being hurt. That I should just accept it and move on because they were soulmates. For a moment, I felt like I might break down completely. 7 years of marriage, 35 years of family, and this was how little I mattered to them. But then something clicked. A strange calm washed over me, and I found myself smiling. "You know what?" I said, my voice steady for the first time all evening. "You're absolutely right. I should be happy for you both." Relief flooded their faces. Elise actually smiled. "I'm so glad you understand, Daniel. This doesn't have to change anything between us as a family." "Not at all," I agreed, reaching into my jacket. "In fact, I have something for each of you." I pulled out 3 thick manila envelopes and handed one each to Elise, my parents, and Lucas. "What's this?" Mom asked. "Just some paperwork," I said cheerfully. "Nothing urgent. You can look at it after I leave." "You're leaving?" Elise asked, sudden panic in her voice. Well, you're right, new beginning and all that. I should let you two lovebirds have your space. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. Oh, and Lucas? You might want to move your car. I'm calling it in as stolen in about an hour. I walked out to the sound of envelopes being torn open behind me. I was 3 blocks away when my phone started ringing. The first call came from Elise, 5 minutes after I'd left. I let it go to voicemail. The second call came 30 seconds later. Then another. By the time I reached the hotel I'd booked across town, I had 17 missed calls and twice as many text messages. The voicemail from Elise was barely coherent through her sobs. Daniel, please, you can't do this. Please come back. We can work this out. Please, I'm begging you. But it was my mother's message that really got to me. Her voice was shaking with rage. Daniel Gerald Weiss, you get back here right now. This is not how we raised you. Family doesn't destroy family. I deleted all the messages without listening to the rest. You see, I'd spent the last 3 months preparing for this moment. The day I discovered their affair, something inside me had broken, but I didn't break down, I got strategic. I'd been documenting everything, planning everything, waiting for the right moment to reveal just how little I meant to them. And they'd given me that moment on a silver platter. The envelopes contained, for Elise, divorce papers, already signed by me and notarized. A post-nuptial agreement she'd signed 2 years earlier when we were having minor trust issues. She'd forgotten about it, but it clearly stated that in the event of adultery, she would forfeit her claim to the house and most of our shared assets. An eviction notice giving her 30 days to vacate the home that was solely in my name. And photographs, dozens of them, printed in high-resolution color, showing her and Lucas in various compromising positions throughout our house. For my parents, copies of all the evidence I'd gathered, including video footage, text message screenshots, and financial records showing how I'd been supporting Lucas while he was sleeping with my wife. A formal letter withdrawing my financial support for their mortgage. I'd been helping with payments since Dad's retirement, and canceling our family cell phone plan that I'd been covering. Also included were printouts of social media posts where they'd been praising Lucas and Elise's friendship while knowing full well what was really happening. For Lucas, the real surprise. Legal documents showing that the car he'd been driving was registered in my name. I'd never transferred the title after co-signing. The keys were now with my lawyer, and I'd already reported it as stolen since he no longer had permission to use it. A formal demand for repayment of all loans I'd given him over the years, itemized, with interest, totaling just over $23,000. And a notice that I'd provided his probation officer with evidence of his recent activities. Apparently, having an affair with his brother's wife while living in said brother's house violated several conditions of his probation from a DUI charge I'd helped him fight 2 years earlier. But the real kicker was what I'd done in the months leading up to this moment. I'd quietly separated our finances, moving my paychecks to a new account and leaving just enough in our joint account to cover the mortgage and utilities. I'd transferred the house deed into a trust that Elise couldn't touch. I'd documented every penny Lucas owed me and every time my parents had asked for financial help while knowing about the affair. Most importantly, I'd been recording conversations. The home security system I'd installed didn't just have that one camera, there were audio pickups throughout the house. Every time Elise brought Lucas over, every conversation they'd had about me, every cruel joke at my expense, every plan they'd made for their future together, I had it all. But before I tell you about what happened next, let me tell you about what I discovered in those first 24 hours after I walked out. Because the chaos was more spectacular than I could have ever imagined. I'd checked into a hotel about 20 minutes from our house, close enough to handle any immediate legal matters, far enough to avoid surprise visits. Around midnight, barely 3 hours after I'd left, hotel security called my room. Mr. Weiss? We have a woman in the lobby claiming to be your wife. She's quite distressed and demanding to see you. She says it's an emergency. Through the phone, I could hear Elise screaming in the background. Daniel. I know you're here. Please, just talk to me. We can fix this. Please tell her I'm not available and ask her to leave, I told security. If she refuses, call the police. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text from Lucas. Dude, you need to come get your crazy wife. She's losing it and mom's having a panic attack. I turned my phone off and went to sleep. The next morning brought a deluge of messages that painted a picture of complete meltdown. Elise had returned to my parents' house around 1 a.m., alternating between hysterical sobbing and rage-filled rants about how I was destroying everyone's lives. Lucas, apparently, had tried to calm her down by suggesting they could weather this storm together, which had backfired spectacularly when Elise turned on him. This is all your fault. She'd screamed, according to a voice message Sophie left me. If you hadn't pushed so hard to tell him, we could have figured something else out. Lucas had stormed out, leaving Elise sobbing on my parents' couch while they tried to figure out how to handle the legal and financial catastrophe I'd dropped on them. But the real drama was just beginning. See, when I discovered the affair, I didn't just gather evidence, I'd spent weeks consulting with lawyers, financial advisors, and even a private investigator. I wanted to understand every possible angle, every potential consequence, every legal ramification of what they'd done. The private investigator, a woman named Colette who specialized in infidelity cases, had been particularly helpful. Most people think affairs are just about the cheating, she'd told me during our first meeting. But there's usually a whole web of deception around them. Financial, social, professional, affairs rarely happen in isolation. She was right. Through her investigation, I learned that Elise and Lucas hadn't just been having an affair, they'd been planning a future together. They had a shared savings account I'd never known about, funded by money Elise had been skimming from our joint account for months. They'd been looking at apartments together, discussing which one of them would file for divorce first, even talking about how to let me down easy. Most damning of all, they'd been in contact with a lawyer about their options. Not a divorce lawyer, a different kind of lawyer. They'd been exploring whether they could claim common law marriage rights to our house if they could prove they'd been living together long enough. The consultation notes Colette obtained showed they'd been planning to gaslight me into believing I was imagining the affair while they established legal residency in my own home. That's when I realized this wasn't just betrayal, it was a calculated scheme to steal my life from the inside out. The financial investigation had been equally revealing. The money Lucas owed me wasn't just from the obvious loans, it was from years of smaller manipulations. Dinners where he'd forgotten his wallet and I'd paid. Concert tickets I'd bought for family bonding. Even groceries when he'd visit and somehow clean out our refrigerator. Colette helped me document every instance where Lucas had cost me money while sleeping with my wife. More importantly, she'd helped me trace the paper trail of their deception. Phone records showing hundreds of calls and texts between them during work hours. Credit card statements showing Elise paying for hotel rooms and expensive dinners on days when she'd told me she was working late. Even social media data showing they'd been checking in at the same locations while I was out of town. But the smoking gun had been the cloud storage. Elise, it turned out, had been backing up her photos to a shared cloud account we'd set up years earlier for family pictures. She'd forgotten about it, and apparently hadn't realized that when she took intimate photos with Lucas, they were automatically uploading to an account I had access to. The photos were extensive. And not just intimate, they showed Lucas in our bed, wearing my clothes, even using my shower. In one particularly galling image, he was sitting at my desk, using my computer, with Elise draped across his lap. But the worst part was the metadata. The photos were time-stamped, geotagged, and dated. I could trace their entire affair through that photo stream, from the first tentative pictures in March to increasingly bold images throughout the summer. The most recent photos, taken just days before my birthday, showed them in our bedroom with wedding rings on the nightstand, as if they were playing house. Colette had helped me organize all of this evidence into a comprehensive file that would hold up in any court. But more than that, she'd helped me understand the psychology of what they'd done. This wasn't a crime of passion, she'd explained. This was a long-term strategy. They wanted your life, Daniel. Not just parts of it, all of it. The house, the financial stability, the family support system. They were planning to push you out and take over everything you'd built. That's when I decided that the birthday confrontation wasn't going to be just about revealing the affair, it was going to be about revealing the entire conspiracy. The day after the confrontation, my phone finally stopped ringing from them and started ringing from others. My uncle Henrik, Dad's older brother who'd always been somewhat cold to me, called around noon. "Daniel, I need to apologize," he said without preamble. "I had no idea what they were doing to you. Your father called me this morning, begging me not to reach out to you, and that's when I knew something was very wrong." "What do you mean?" I asked. "He told me you were overreacting to Elise and Lucas's relationship, that you were being vindictive and trying to destroy the family." But the way he said it. "Daniel, I've known your father for 53 years, and I've never heard him sound so panicked. What really happened?" I told him everything. When I finished, there was a long silence. "Good Lord," he whispered. "Daniel, I'm so sorry. I always thought there was something off about how they treated you, but I never imagined. Look, I have a guest house. It's yours for as long as you need it. And I'm calling every person in this family to tell them what really happened." That was the beginning of the second wave of consequences. Within 48 hours of Henrik starting his own investigation, the extended family was buzzing with information I hadn't even known about. Apparently, my parents hadn't just known about the affair, they'd been actively facilitating it in ways I never could have imagined. My cousin Isabel called me with the first bombshell. "Daniel, I need to tell you something. Last month, when you were on that business trip to Denver, your mom called me asking if I could cover for Elise if anyone asked where she was." "Cover for her how?" "She told me that Elise was going to a spa weekend with Lucas as siblings in-law bonding, and that if you called asking about her, I should say she was with me at my house. She made it sound like it was some kind of surprise they were planning for you. My blood ran cold. Did you cover for her? No, thank God. I thought it was weird and told your mom I wasn't comfortable lying to you. But Daniel, how many other people do you think they asked? That question led to the discovery of an entire network of lies my family had been maintaining to cover for the affair. Sophie, who had been kept in the dark about the sexual relationship, had still been asked to provide alibis for family planning meetings that were actually rendezvous. My Aunt Brigitte had been told that Lucas was helping Elise with a surprise renovation project to explain why his car was at our house so often. Even our elderly neighbor, Mrs. Dubois, had been recruited. My mother had told her that Lucas was doing handyman work for us and asked her to not mention it to Daniel because it was going to be a surprise. The web of deception was so extensive that it had required coordination from nearly a dozen people, most of whom had no idea what they were actually covering for. But the revelation that broke me came from my cousin Jonas, Henrik's son, who worked in IT for a large corporation. Daniel, I need you to sit down for this, he said when he called. Henrik asked me to help him figure out some of the technology stuff in your evidence file. I've been going through those cloud photos, and I found something you might have missed. What is it? There are screenshots in there. Screenshots of text conversations between Elise, Lucas, and your parents. But also screenshots of conversations with other people planning. Daniel, they were planning to have you committed. The words didn't compute at first. What do you mean, committed? There are text conversations from 6 weeks ago where they're discussing how to handle your inevitable breakdown when they told you about the affair. Your mother was researching involuntary psychiatric holds. Lucas was looking up symptoms of narcissistic rage. They were building a case that you were mentally unstable and potentially dangerous. I sat in silence for several minutes, absorbing this information. Jonas, are you telling me they were planning to have me institutionalized for discovering their affair? That's exactly what I'm telling you. They had a whole strategy, Daniel. They were going to tell you about the relationship, wait for you to get upset, then use your reaction as evidence that you needed professional help. They'd already contacted a psychiatrist about getting you evaluated. The screenshots Jonas sent me were worse than anything I could have imagined. My own family discussing me like I was a problem to be managed rather than a person being betrayed. Mom, when we tell Daniel, he's going to lose it. He's always been unstable when things don't go his way. Lucas, I've been documenting some of his controlling behavior with Elise. We might need that for evidence. Elise, he's been so suspicious lately. Almost paranoid. Maybe we can use that. Mom, Dr. Fontaine said that if we can show a pattern of irrational behavior, we could probably get a 72-hour hold for evaluation. Lucas, then what? He gets out and comes after us? Mom, not if we can prove he's a danger to himself or others. I've been researching guardianship laws. Reading those messages, I realized that my family hadn't just betrayed me, they'd been planning to literally steal my freedom, my autonomy, my entire life. They were going to gaslight me into believing I was crazy for being upset about their betrayal, then use the medical system to lock me away while they took over everything I'd worked for. The most chilling part was a message from my father: Daniel's always trusted us completely. He'll never see this coming. They were right. I never would have seen it coming. Even after discovering the affair, even after months of planning my own response, I never could have imagined that my own parents were researching how to have me declared incompetent. That's when I realized that the envelopes I'd handed out weren't just revenge, they were self-defense. If I hadn't acted first, if I'd given them time to implement their plan, I might have found myself locked in a psychiatric facility while they divided up my assets and painted me as a dangerous, delusional man who couldn't accept his wife's happiness. Jonas helped me document everything and send it to my lawyer, who was as shocked as I was. Daniel, what they were planning would have been criminal, he told me. Conspiracy to commit fraud, abuse of the medical system, possibly even kidnapping depending on how they'd implemented it. This changes everything about your case. But it also changed everything about how I saw my family. This wasn't just about an affair anymore. This was about people who were willing to destroy my sanity, my freedom, and my reputation to cover up their betrayal. The discovery of their psychiatric manipulation plan also explained some things that had seemed odd over the previous months. Elise's sudden concern about my stress levels and suggestions that I talk to someone. Lucas's comments about me seeming on edge lately. My mother's questions about whether I was sleeping okay and if I felt like work was too much pressure. They'd been laying groundwork to portray me as mentally unstable long before they planned to reveal the affair. Armed with this new evidence, my lawyer filed additional motions that changed the entire trajectory of the case. We weren't just seeking divorce and repayment anymore, we were documenting a conspiracy that could have resulted in criminal charges for everyone involved. But before I get to the legal consequences, let me tell you about the most surreal week of my life, the week when I discovered just how deep their deception had gone, and how many people had been unknowingly recruited into their scheme. It started when my college roommate, Matthias, called me out of the blue. "Daniel, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me," he said. "Are you okay? Like, mentally okay?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" "Your brother Lucas reached out to me last week. He said you'd been having some kind of breakdown and that your family was worried about you. He asked if I'd noticed any signs of instability when we talk, if you'd seemed paranoid or delusional." My blood ran cold. "He what?" "He made it sound like you were having some kind of psychotic break and that they were trying to get you help. He asked if I'd be willing to provide a statement about your mental state for some kind of intervention they were planning." "Matthias, what did you tell him?" "I told him he was crazy. You're the most stable person I know." "But Daniel, what the heck is going on? Why would your brother be calling your friends asking about your mental health?" That phone call opened a floodgate. Over the next few days, I discovered that Lucas and my parents had been systematically contacting my friends, colleagues, and acquaintances, painting me as mentally unstable and asking them to document any concerning behavior they'd witnessed. My work colleague Nina called me that same day. "Daniel, I got the weirdest call from someone claiming to be your brother. He was asking about your performance at work, whether you'd seemed stressed or erratic lately. I told him to call HR if he had concerns, but it felt really inappropriate." My high school friend Julian reached out through Facebook. "Hey man, your mom called my mom asking about warning signs to watch for in our friend group. My mom was confused because you seemed fine when we all had dinner last month. What's going on?" Even my gym buddy Eric had been contacted. Some woman claiming to be your mother called the gym asking if you'd been acting aggressively during workouts. The manager told her that was none of her business, but she seemed really insistent that you were dangerous. I realized they'd been building a case against my sanity for weeks, maybe months. They were creating a paper trail of concerned family members reaching out to my support network, planting seeds of doubt about my mental stability, gathering ammunition for their plan to have me committed. The most chilling call came from my former therapist, Dr. Hartman, who I'd seen briefly 3 years earlier during a stressful period at work. "Daniel, I received a very concerning call from someone claiming to be your mother. She was asking about our sessions and whether I'd noted any signs of potential violence or instability. I told her I couldn't discuss your treatment, but she seemed to have very specific concerns about your mental health. Dr. Hartman, I haven't spoken to my mother about therapy in years." "What exactly did she say?" "She claimed you were having paranoid delusions about your wife cheating and that the family was worried you might hurt yourself or someone else. She wanted to know if I thought you met criteria for involuntary commitment." "And what did you tell her?" "I told her that if they were genuinely concerned about your safety, they should call 911 or take you to an emergency room. But Daniel, based on our previous sessions, nothing she describes sounds consistent with your personality or mental health history. Are you actually having the problems she described?" "Dr. Hartman, my wife really is having an affair with my brother. I have evidence. My family knows about it and has been covering for them. I'm not paranoid or delusional, I'm being gaslighted." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for nearly a minute. "Daniel, I think you need to document everything you just told me and speak with a lawyer immediately. What your family is doing could constitute abuse of the mental health system." That conversation led me to make a discovery that shook me to my core. I called Dr. Fontaine, the psychiatrist my mother had mentioned in her text messages, and asked if I could schedule a consultation. "Mr. Weiss, yes, I've been expecting your call. Your family has provided quite a lot of background information about your situation. They're very concerned about you." "What kind of background information?" "Well, your mother and brother have documented several incidents of paranoid behavior, accusations against your wife, obsessive monitoring of her activities. They're worried you might be developing some kind of delusional disorder." "Doctor, would you be willing to share what evidence they provided?" "I probably shouldn't discuss the details over the phone, but they have photos of surveillance equipment you installed in your home, copies of notes you've been making about your wife's activities, even recordings of you confronting them about these alleged affairs. It's quite comprehensive." My hands were shaking as I absorbed this information. They hadn't just been planning to have me committed, they'd already built the case. They had evidence of my paranoid behavior that was actually evidence of me discovering their affair. They'd been recording my confrontations with them to use as proof of my instability. "Dr. Fontaine, I need you to know that everything they told you is a lie. My wife really is having an affair with my brother. I can prove it. They're trying to have me committed to cover up their betrayal." "Mr. Weiss, that's exactly the kind of statement your family warned me you'd make. They said you'd insist the evidence was real and that everyone was conspiring against you." I hung up the phone and immediately called my lawyer. "They've weaponized the mental health system against me," I told him. "They have a psychiatrist convinced I'm delusional, they've contacted my friends and colleagues to build a case against my sanity, and they were planning to use my discovery of their affair as evidence that I need to be institutionalized. My lawyer was quiet for a long moment. Daniel, this is one of the most sophisticated gaslighting campaigns I've ever seen. They're not just cheating on you, they're trying to steal your reality. That afternoon, we filed emergency motions to prevent any psychiatric evaluation or intervention that hadn't been ordered by a court. We also sent cease and desist letters to Dr. Fontaine and anyone else my family had contacted about my mental health. But the damage was already done in some ways. I'd learned that my own family was capable of psychological warfare on a level I'd never imagined possible. They weren't just willing to betray me, they were willing to destroy my reputation, my relationships, and my sanity to protect their secret. The scariest part was how close they'd come to succeeding. If I hadn't discovered the affair when I did, if I hadn't gathered evidence, if I hadn't acted first, they might have actually convinced people I was mentally ill. I could have lost everything: my job, my freedom, my credibility, my entire life. Within 48 hours, I'd heard from cousins, aunts, uncles, and family friends who'd been getting frantic calls from my parents trying to control the narrative. But Uncle Henrik had been busy too, and the real story was spreading faster than their version. My cousin Chloe, who worked in HR at a large corporation, called with some interesting news. Daniel, I don't know if this helps, but I reached out to a friend who works at Elise's company. Apparently, she's been logging into her work computer from your house during business hours when she's supposed to be working from home, and someone named Lucas has been in the background of several video calls. Her supervisor is asking questions. That was when I learned about the third wave of consequences I hadn't even planned. Elise's employer had been conducting a quiet investigation into work-from-home productivity, and the timestamps on my security footage perfectly matched the time she was supposed to be working. The evidence I'd gathered didn't just show infidelity, it showed time theft, misuse of company resources, and violation of their work-from-home policies. She was quietly let go 2 days later. But the consequences were just getting started. Lucas's car, my car, technically, had been impounded when he couldn't produce registration or insurance documents. Since the title was in my name and I'd reported it stolen, he was looking at potential charges. His probation officer was not amused to discover that he'd been violating the terms of his community service by carrying on an affair in someone else's home. My parents were facing their own reckoning. The mortgage help I'd been providing was more significant than I'd realized. Without it, they were looking at serious financial strain. More importantly, the extended family's reaction was swift and brutal. Uncle Henrik had been calling everyone, and the consensus was clear: what they'd done was unforgivable. My sister Sophie called me, crying. "Daniel, I'm so sorry. I didn't know how bad it was. Mom made it sound like you were just being jealous and possessive. I never would have said those things if I'd known the truth." "What things?" I asked. "At the party, when I said maybe you two weren't meant to be. Daniel, I thought you were just being stubborn about some minor issue. I had no idea about any of this." "Sophie, they all knew. Mom, Dad, Lucas, Elise, they all knew this was happening for months. They planned to tell me at my birthday party and expected me to just accept it." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for nearly a minute. "They what?" she finally whispered. That was when I realized that even Sophie hadn't known the full scope of the betrayal. My parents had been managing the narrative carefully, telling different people different versions of events to minimize their own culpability. But there was one more surprise waiting for me. 3 days after the confrontation, I received a text message from an unknown number with a screenshot attached. It was from my old high school friend Julian, who'd somehow gotten pulled into the drama through mutual social media connections. The screenshot was from a group chat between Elise, Lucas, and my mother, dated 6 months earlier. "Mom, I think Daniel's getting suspicious. Maybe you two should be more careful. Lucas, he's too trusting. He'd never suspect his own brother. Elise, I feel bad sometimes, but you're right. He's so focused on work and that stupid house project. He barely pays attention to me anymore. Mom, maybe you two are the real match. Daniel's always been so cold anyway. Even as a child, he was more interested in his computers than his family. Lucas, think he'd actually be okay with it if we told him? Mom, if we frame it right. Daniel hates confrontation. He'll probably just accept it and move on. Elise, I hope so. I can't keep pretending much longer." Reading those messages was like being stabbed all over again. They hadn't just betrayed me, they'd been strategizing about it, planning how to manipulate me into accepting their betrayal. My own mother had been actively encouraging my wife to cheat with my brother. That screenshot became the final piece of evidence I needed. I forwarded it to my lawyer, who added it to the growing file of evidence for the divorce proceedings. I sent it to Uncle Henrik, who shared it with the rest of the family. And then, in a moment of what was probably petty revenge, I posted it to our family group chat, the one that included all our cousins, aunts, uncles, and family friends. The response was immediate and devastating. Cousin after cousin began removing my parents and Lucas from the group chat. Family members who had been neutral suddenly chose sides, and it wasn't my parents' side. The annual family reunion was cancelled when half the family said they wouldn't attend if my parents were there. Uncle Henrik called me that evening. "Daniel, I want you to know something. I've been thinking about this situation, and I need to tell you what I've decided. I'm changing my will. Your father was supposed to inherit the family business, but after what he's done to you, I can't in good conscience leave it to him. I want you to have it." I was stunned. Uncle Henrik owned a successful electrical contracting business that employed a dozen people and generated substantial revenue. "Uncle Henrik, I don't know anything about electrical work." "No, but you understand business, you understand technology, and most importantly, you understand loyalty. The business is going to need to evolve anyway, and you're the only person in this family I trust to do that." That conversation changed everything for me. For the first time since discovering the affair, I felt like I had a future to look forward to instead of just a past to escape from. Meanwhile, the consequences continued to mount for everyone else. Lucas had been arrested for driving without a license after his was suspended for violating his probation. He was now facing potential jail time and had moved back in with my parents, who were struggling to make ends meet without my financial support. Elise had moved in with them too, temporarily, since she couldn't afford her own place without a job. According to Sophie, the living situation was tense. "They're fighting constantly," Sophie told me during one of our weekly check-in calls. Lucas blames Elise for pushing too hard too fast. Elise blames Lucas for not being more discreet. Mom and Dad are barely speaking to each other because Dad thinks Mom pushed too hard for this whole thing. "What do you mean, Mom pushed for it?" "Apparently, she's the one who encouraged Elise to follow her heart and convinced Lucas that you'd be fine with it. Dad went along with it, but he never really thought it was a good idea. Now he's saying Mom destroyed the family." The irony was almost too perfect. The woman who'd spent months orchestrating my betrayal was now being blamed by everyone for the consequences of that betrayal. But it wasn't over yet. My lawyer had been busy building a case that went beyond simple divorce proceedings. With the evidence I'd gathered, he'd convinced the district attorney to investigate potential fraud charges related to the misuse of marital assets and the deception around Lucas's use of the car. "Daniel," he explained during one of our meetings, "what they did to you wasn't just morally wrong, some of it was actually criminal. The systematic concealment of the affair while continuing to accept financial support, Lucas's use of property he knew he didn't have permission to use, your mother's active participation in the concealment, there are grounds for multiple charges here. I had to make a decision. Did I want to pursue criminal charges, or was the civil case enough? Looking back, I think that decision defined who I was going to be going forward. I could destroy them completely, or I could take what I needed to rebuild and walk away. I chose to walk away, mostly. File the civil suits, I told him. I want every penny Lucas owes me, plus damages. I want Elise to understand that actions have consequences. But I don't want to send anyone to jail." "Are you sure? With the evidence you have, we could probably get significant jail time for all of them." "I'm sure. I don't want to become the kind of person who destroys people out of spite. I just want them to understand that they can't treat people the way they treated me." 3 weeks later, the final shoe dropped. But before I get to that, let me tell you about what happened in those weeks leading up to it, because the situation continued to deteriorate in ways I hadn't expected. It started when my college roommate, Matthias, called me with an update. "Daniel, I need to tell you something. After that weird call from your brother, I started asking around our friend group. Turns out, he didn't just call me, he called at least 6 other people from college, all with the same story about you having a breakdown." "What did everyone tell him?" "That's the thing, everyone thought it was weird and most people told him to back off. But Daniel, one person said something that really bothered me. Remember Jake from our organic chemistry class?" I did remember Jake. We'd been study partners junior year. "Jake told your brother that you'd always been intense and that he could see you snapping if someone betrayed you. He actually offered to provide a statement about your obsessive tendencies in college." My blood ran cold. "He what?" "Yeah, apparently Jake had some grudge against you from college that I never knew about. Something about a group project where he thought you were too controlling. Your brother ate it up, said it was exactly the kind of evidence they needed. That revelation sent me into a spiral of paranoia that took days to shake off. How many other people from my past harbored small resentments that could be weaponized against me? How many casual acquaintances might be willing to provide evidence of my instability if asked the right way? I realized that my family's plan wasn't just sophisticated, it was diabolical. They were systematically mining my entire social history for any ammunition they could use to paint me as unstable. The scariest part was how well it might have worked. If they'd had just a few more weeks, if I hadn't discovered their scheme when I did, they might have assembled enough witnesses to my supposed instability to convince a judge that I needed psychiatric intervention. But there was something else I discovered that was even worse. I was at work when I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Daniel? This is Claire Weiss. I'm your father's sister-in-law, Henrik's wife." "Hi, Claire. Is everything okay? I wanted to let you know that your mother called me this morning. She's asking if Henrik and I can help them with their mortgage payment. Apparently, they're facing foreclosure." My heart sank despite everything they'd done to me. "What did you tell her?" "I told her that after what they did to you, she was lucky we were still speaking to them at all. But Daniel, I'm worried about them. Whatever you did to cut off their support, it's hitting them hard." I'd known this day would come. The truth was, I'd been covering more of their expenses than even I had realized. The mortgage help, the cell phone plan, the car insurance for Lucas, the occasional emergency loans, it had all added up to nearly $2,000 a month in support that they'd taken for granted. But there was something else Claire didn't know yet. Something that made their financial crisis much worse than just losing my support. "Claire, there's something you should know. They weren't just planning to betray me, they were planning to have me declared mentally incompetent and take control of my finances. My lawyer discovered that they'd already contacted a guardianship attorney." "They what?" "They were building a case that I was mentally ill and dangerous. If they'd succeeded, they would have had legal control over my bank accounts, my house, everything. They weren't just stealing my wife and my family, they were trying to steal my entire life." The silence on the other end was deafening. "Claire, I appreciate you telling me about their situation, but they made their choice. They chose greed and betrayal over family. They have to live with that decision." "Daniel, I had no idea. Your mother made it sound like you were just being vindictive about the divorce. That's exactly what they wanted everyone to think. But this was never about a divorce. This was about a conspiracy to destroy me completely." After I hung up, I sat in my office for a long time, thinking about the people who'd raised me, who'd taught me that family came first, who'd betrayed that very principle when it came to protecting me. Part of me wanted to help them. But I'd learned something important over the past few months. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let people experience the consequences of their choices. And sometimes, the most dangerous thing you can do is underestimate how far people will go when they think they can get away with it. That evening, I received my final surprise communication from the old life. It was a letter, delivered by certified mail, from Elise. "Daniel, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need you to know how sorry I am. Not just for the affair, but for everything. For the way we told you, for the way your family treated you, for all of it. Lucas and I broke up 2 weeks ago. I know you probably don't care, but I wanted you to know that what we had wasn't real love. It was just, I don't know what it was. Selfishness, maybe. A fantasy. I miss you. I miss our life together. I know I have no right to ask, but is there any chance we could try again? I'd do anything to make this right. I know you probably won't forgive me, but I had to try. Love always, Elise." I read the letter twice, then did something that would have surprised the old me. I wrote back. "Elise, thank you for the apology. I hope you mean it. To answer your question, no, there's no chance we could try again. What you and Lucas did to me wasn't just an affair, it was a betrayal so complete that it changed who I am as a person. I can't unknow what I know about you, about my family, about how little I meant to all of you. But I want you to know that I forgive you. Not because what you did was okay, but because carrying anger around was hurting me more than it was hurting you. I hope you figure out what you actually want in life, and I hope you find a way to get it without destroying other people in the process. I won't be responding to any future communications. Daniel, P.S. I'm still happy for you and Lucas. Just like you wanted." Final update, the aftermath nobody expected. It's been another 3 months since I wrote the original post, and I figured I owed you all one final update because the story took some turns that even I didn't see coming. Remember how I said Lucas and Elise broke up 2 weeks after the whole confrontation? Well, that was just the beginning of their problems. Last month, I got a call from Sophie with news that honestly made me feel a little sorry for them. Apparently, the financial pressure of losing my support, combined with Lucas's legal troubles and Elise's unemployment, had created a pressure cooker situation in my parents' tiny apartment. "Daniel, they're destroying each other," Sophie told me. "Lucas blames Elise for pushing to tell you too soon. Elise blames Lucas for not being able to support her financially. Mom blames Dad for not stopping her from encouraging the whole thing. Dad blames everyone for putting him in this position. It's like watching a family implode in real time." But the real shock came when Sophie told me what happened next. "Lucas moved out last week," she said. "But not because of the fighting. He got arrested again." "For what?" Remember that private investigator you hired? Colette? Apparently she'd been keeping tabs on Lucas as part of your case documentation. When she saw him driving a different car, one that looked suspiciously similar to the neighbors, she called it in to the police. It turned out Lucas had been stealing. Not just cars, but anything he could get his hands on. Tools from construction sites, packages from porches, even groceries from unlocked cars. The financial pressure of paying me back, combined with his inability to hold down a job, had driven him to petty crime. The worst part, Sophie continued, is that he'd been doing it for months, even before your confrontation. The police found evidence linking him to dozens of thefts in the neighborhood. Your parents had no idea. Lucas was now facing multiple felony charges and looking at serious prison time. The brother who'd stolen my wife had been stealing from everyone. But that wasn't even the most shocking development. Daniel, there's something else you need to know about Elise, Sophie said, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. She's pregnant. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Lucas's? That's the thing, she says she doesn't know. The timing. It could be yours or his. The implications hit me like a freight train. For months, while I'd been planning our future and working to build our dream home, Elise had been sleeping with both of us. The thought that there might be a child involved, a child who could be mine, changed everything. Sophie, has she tried to contact me about this? That's why I'm calling. She wants to meet with you. She's claiming that if the baby is yours, she wants to try to work things out. I spent 3 sleepless nights thinking about that phone call. On one hand, if there was a chance the child was mine, didn't I have a responsibility to know? On the other hand, this felt like another manipulation, a way to draw me back into their dysfunction when I'd finally escaped. I decided to meet with Elise, but on my terms. We met at a coffee shop in a neutral part of town, with my lawyer present and a recording device running. She looked terrible. The confident, beautiful woman I'd married was gone, replaced by someone who looked exhausted and desperate. Her hair was unwashed, her clothes were wrinkled, and she had dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't hide. Daniel, thank you for coming, she said, reaching for my hand across the table. I pulled it away. Elise, I'm here because Sophie said you're pregnant and that you don't know who the father is. Is that true? She nodded, tears starting to flow. I know you hate me, and you have every right to. But if this baby is yours, don't you want to know? Of course I want to know. We'll do a paternity test as soon as it's safe to do so. But I need you to understand something, even if the child is mine, that doesn't mean I'm coming back to you. But Daniel, we could be a family. We could start over. I looked at this woman who'd spent months lying to me, manipulating me, and conspiring to have me declared mentally ill, and I felt nothing. Not anger, not love, not even pity. Just nothing. Elise, you destroyed our marriage long before you got pregnant. You destroyed our family. You destroyed my relationship with my parents and my brother. Even if this child is mine, I will never trust you again. But people make mistakes. People can change. Some mistakes can be forgiven, I said quietly. But what you did wasn't a mistake. It was a calculated campaign to destroy my life and steal everything I'd worked for. That's not something people come back from. The paternity test results came back 6 weeks later. The baby wasn't mine. I felt relief and sadness in equal measure. Relief that I wouldn't be tied to Elise for the next 18 years. Sadness that the child would grow up in the chaos that Elise and Lucas had created. But the story doesn't end there. 2 weeks after the paternity results, I got a call that I never expected. It was from my father. Daniel, I need to see you, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm dying. The doctors had found aggressive pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. He had maybe 3 months to live. Dad, I'm sorry to hear that. Daniel, please. I know we destroyed everything between us, but I need to talk to you before it's too late. I agreed to meet him, again with my lawyer present. We met at the hospital where he was receiving treatment. He looked frail and old in a way that shocked me. It had only been 6 months since I'd seen him, but he'd aged years. Son, I need you to know that what we did to you was the worst thing I've ever done in my life, he said, his eyes filling with tears. Your mother convinced me that you'd be better off without Elise, that Lucas and Elise were truly in love, that you'd understand eventually. I was weak, and I went along with it. Dad, it wasn't just about the affair. You were planning to have me committed to steal my assets. I know, he whispered. And I will regret that for whatever time I have left. Your mother. She got so caught up in this fantasy that Lucas and Elise were soulmates that she lost sight of what was right. And I was too much of a coward to stop her. Why are you telling me this now? Because I want you to know that Lucas and Elise weren't soulmates. They never were. Lucas is in jail, Elise is struggling as a single mother, and your mother is having a breakdown. She can't accept that her plan destroyed our entire family. We talked for 2 hours. He told me about the pressure my mother had put on him to go along with her schemes, about how guilty he'd felt watching them manipulate me, about how he'd known it was wrong but had been too afraid of my mother's anger to stand up to her. Daniel, I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I need you to know that I love you. I've always loved you. You were the son I was most proud of, and I failed you when you needed me most. I didn't forgive him that day. Maybe I never will. But I did agree to visit him again. My father died 6 weeks later. I was there when it happened, holding his hand as he passed away. My mother was on the other side of the bed, and Lucas was in jail, unable to get permission to attend. At the funeral, the extended family was split. Half the people there wouldn't speak to my mother, and the other half didn't know what to think. I gave a eulogy about the father I remembered from childhood, the man who taught me to fix things, who worked extra shifts to pay for my college, who had raised me to value honesty and integrity. I didn't mention the man who had betrayed those very values in the end. After the funeral, my mother approached me. Daniel, now that your father is gone, can we please try to heal this family? I looked at her, this woman who had orchestrated the destruction of my marriage, who had planned to have me institutionalized, who had manipulated everyone around her to cover up her schemes, and I felt that same emptiness I'd felt with Elise. Mom, there is no family to heal. You destroyed it. But we're all we have left now. Lucas will be out of prison eventually, Elise needs support with the baby, and I can't handle all of this alone. You made your choices, Mom. All of you did. You chose Lucas and Elise over me. You chose deception over honesty. You chose to try to destroy my sanity rather than admit what you'd done. Those choices have consequences. But I'm your mother. No, I said quietly. A mother protects her children. A mother doesn't conspire to have them declared mentally ill. A mother doesn't help orchestrate the destruction of their marriage. You stopped being my mother the day you decided that Lucas's happiness was more important than my sanity. I walked away from her that day, and I haven't spoken to her since. The real final chapter. It's been a year now since that birthday party that changed everything. I'm writing this final update from my new office in Seattle, where Uncle Henrik's electrical business has grown into a full-scale smart home automation company. We just landed a contract with a major tech firm to outfit their entire campus, and I'm genuinely excited about work for the first time in years. Lena and I moved in together last month. She's met Uncle Henrik and Aunt Claire, who've become the parental figures I needed after losing my biological family. They're good people who value loyalty and honesty, qualities I'd almost forgotten existed after what I'd been through. I still talk to Sophie regularly. She's the only member of my biological family who maintains contact with me, and even that relationship is careful and guarded. She tells me that my mother has had what can only be described as a complete mental breakdown. The woman who had spent months orchestrating elaborate schemes to manipulate everyone around her apparently couldn't handle the consequences when those schemes backfired. Lucas is serving a 3-year sentence for multiple theft charges. According to Sophie, he blames everyone but himself for his situation, me for overreacting, Elise for not being supportive enough, our parents for not having his back, the legal system for being unfair. He's apparently convinced that he's the real victim in all of this. Elise is struggling as a single mother. The baby, a little girl, is healthy, but Elise is barely keeping her head above water financially and emotionally. She's been asking Sophie to pass along messages asking if I'd be willing to help her get back on her feet for old time's sake. I declined. Sophie also told me something that honestly didn't surprise me but still made me sad. Elise has been telling people that I was abusive during our marriage, that I was controlling and paranoid, and that the affair was her way of escaping an unhealthy relationship. She's rewritten history in her mind to make herself the victim and me the villain. It doesn't matter anymore. The people who know me know better, and the people who believe her version of events weren't really my friends anyway. But here's what I want everyone reading this to understand: this story isn't really about revenge. Yes, I planned a dramatic confrontation. Yes, I gathered evidence and consulted lawyers and made sure there were consequences for their actions. But the real story is about learning to value yourself enough to walk away from people who don't value you. For 35 years, I defined myself by how useful I was to other people. I was the reliable son, the supportive brother, the hardworking husband, the dependable friend. I measured my worth by how much I could give, how much I could fix, how much I could sacrifice for the people I loved. It never occurred to me to ask whether those people valued me for who I was rather than what I could do for them. The affair was devastating, but it wasn't the worst part of what happened to me. The worst part was discovering that my entire family saw me as a resource to be managed rather than a person to be loved. They were willing to destroy my sanity, my freedom, and my future to protect their secret because they believed I existed to serve them, not the other way around. Learning that was the most painful experience of my life. It was also the most liberating. What I've learned, the real TL, Dr. 1. People show you who they are through their actions, not their words. My family spent years telling me I was loved and valued while treating me like a walking ATM and emotional support system. 2. Loyalty is a two-way street. I spent decades being loyal to people who wouldn't lift a finger to protect me when it mattered. 3. Some relationships can't be repaired. Not because of what happened, but because of what it revealed about the people involved. 4. You can't change people who don't want to change. Lucas still blames everyone else for his problems. Elise still thinks she was justified in her actions. My mother still believes she was trying to help everyone be happy. They haven't learned anything from the consequences they faced. 5. Sometimes walking away is the strongest thing you can do. It would have been easier to forgive them, to try to rebuild those relationships, to go back to being the family ATM and emotional caretaker. But easier isn't always better. 6. You can build a new family. Uncle Henrik and Aunt Claire have shown me more genuine love and support in the past year than my biological family showed me in decades. Lena loves me for who I am, not what I can do for her. The team at our company has become like brothers to me, real brothers who have my back when things get tough. 7. Success really is the best revenge. Not because it hurts the people who wronged you, but because it proves to yourself that you didn't need them anyway. Final update, I promise this time. 3 weeks ago, I received a letter in the mail. It was from Lucas, written from prison. Daniel, I've had a lot of time to think about what happened, and I realize now that we all made mistakes. I know you're probably still angry, but I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me someday. We're family, and family should stick together no matter what. I get out in 18 months. When I do, I'd like to try to rebuild our relationship. I know things got complicated with Elise, but that's in the past now. Maybe we can start fresh. I hope you're doing well. Your brother, Lucas. I read that letter 3 times, looking for any sign that he understood what he'd actually done wrong. Any acknowledgement of the betrayal, the lies, the conspiracy to have me committed. Any genuine remorse for the pain he'd caused. There was none. Even after a year in prison, facing the consequences of his actions, Lucas still saw himself as someone who'd made mistakes rather than calculated choices. He still thought of our relationship as something that could be fixed with time and good intentions. I wrote back, Lucas, you're right that we're family. But family doesn't sleep with their brother's wife. Family doesn't conspire to have each other declared mentally ill. Family doesn't steal from each other, lie to each other, or manipulate each other. You're not my brother anymore. You gave up that right when you chose to destroy my life for your own pleasure. Don't contact me again. Daniel, I sent that letter and felt peace. For the first time in over a year, I felt completely at peace with my decision to walk away. Some bridges are worth rebuilding. Others need to stay burned. To everyone who's been following this story, thank you for all the support, advice, and encouragement you've given me over the past year. Writing about this experience has been therapeutic in ways I never expected, and your responses have helped me understand that I'm not crazy for feeling the way I do about all this. For those of you dealing with family betrayal, toxic relationships, or people who take advantage of your loyalty, it's okay to choose yourself. It's okay to set boundaries. It's okay to walk away from people who hurt you, even if they're family. You don't owe anyone your sanity, your financial security, or your emotional well-being just because you share DNA with them. You don't have to accept betrayal just because the people betraying you claim to love you. You deserve to be surrounded by people who value you for who you are, not what you can do for them. You deserve relationships built on mutual respect, honesty, and genuine care. Sometimes you have to lose a family to find your real family. Sometimes you have to burn bridges to build better ones. And sometimes the best revenge really is just living well without the people who never deserved you in the first place. Final edit, for those asking about updates on Elise, Lucas, and my mother, I genuinely don't know and don't want to know. Sophie respects my boundaries about not sharing information about them, and I've blocked them on all social media platforms. That chapter of my life is closed, and I intend to keep it that way. For those asking about Lena, we're engaged. Uncle Henrik is walking me down the aisle, and the wedding will be a celebration of the family I've chosen rather than the one I was born into. Sometimes the best endings are really new beginnings. Thank you all for being part of this journey with me. Take care of yourselves, and remember, you're worth more than the worst treatment you're willing to accept.